The Canadian government said to Hong Kongers, come to Canada. We want you to come to Canada. We have a pathway for you to come here. If you work, if you study, we will make sure you get your PR in a good amount of time and ultimately citizenship. Then Hong Kongers who decided to do that made a fundamental life change, right? They essentially sold everything and came to Canada on the promise that the Canadian government would follow through with what they asked. So the problem that we're facing now is that the government has essentially gone back on its promise in terms of providing PR to Hong Kongers in these streams, and which I think is a bad thing. So the government has said, oops, we made a mistake, sorry, we don't actually have a way to get you here. It's going to take 50 years for you to get your PR, right? A ridiculous number like that. And I think that's wrong. I think that is not something that the government should do. The government should follow through. When it makes a commitment, it should follow through on that commitment.
Good morning, every Brad. Thank you so much for the time, and hope you have a great week in Vancouver.
Yeah, it's been a great time here. It's had a lot of fun, met a lot of people, and it's an honor to be with you this morning, Devin.
Yeah, thank you. And first question is, during the interactive session with MP Checkout and the Hong Kong Pathway applicants back in Tuesday, you mentioned about Hong Kong Pathway is a bit different from other regular stream of immigration like studying and working.
Yeah.
And why do you say that?
Well, fundamentally, with Hong Kongers, the Canadian government said to Hong Kongers, come to Canada. We want you to come to Canada. We have a pathway for you to come here. If you work, if you study, we will make sure you get your PR in a good amount of time and ultimately citizenship. And so it's different than somebody making a choice to, I could go to UK, I could go to Australia, I could go to Canada to study, for example. It's a choice that the person makes. But in this case, it was more the government saying very specifically to Hong Kongers, we want you to come to Canada, and we have this program that you can take. And of course, what happens is then Hong Kongers who decided to do that made a fundamental life change, right? They essentially sold everything and came to Canada on the promise that the Canadian government would follow through with what they asked.
Right, yes. And then you also suggested the idea of utilizing some of the quotas from refugee stream into H&C. And you mentioned about 50,000. And I made some research. The latest immigration level plan, it has around 49,300 each year.
Yes.
And can you elaborate more on this? And
yeah, so the problem that we're facing now is that the government has essentially gone back on its promise in terms of providing PR to Hong Kongers in these streams, and which I think is a bad thing. So the government has said, oops, we made a mistake, sorry, we don't actually have a way to get you here. It's going to take 50 years for you to get your PR, right? A ridiculous number like that. And I think that's wrong. I think that is not something that the government should do. The government should follow through. When it makes a commitment, it should follow through on that commitment. And that's been a problem that we've seen with the Liberal government year after year, is a failure to follow through on commitments. They'll say they'll do something, but they don't actually do it. And this is a great example of that. And so we have this dilemma that we have this group of people who are here in Canada now, who were asked to come to Canada, who gave up almost everything to come to Canada, and now they're stuck. The Hong Kongers are stuck. And so we think our solution is a very good one, and that is that, as you said, there's about 50,000 spots reserved every year for refugees to become permanent residents. In many cases, those refugees aren't yet in Canada. And so what we're suggesting is that the government slow down, reduce the amount of refugees that they're bringing into the country, and then use those slots to process through the backlog of Hong Kong applicants, as well as Ukrainian applicants and Sudanese applicants, who are all stuck in the same very small pathway. And it's causing a problem for all three groups, in particular Hong Kongers. And so if we reduce the number of refugees for a year or two, use those slots to push through the people that are stuck in the H&C category, like Hong Kongers, then I think we can go back to resuming refugees after that. But it's a way to deal with people who are already in Canada who need a slot to get into the PR system.
Right, but obviously refugee stream have a different definition with H&C. So what do you think are the major obstacles to push it through the parliament across the floor?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, clearly refugees are different than Hong Kongers. I mean, they're not the same people. But what matters most is the government has set a limit, and I think it's important. We've been calling on the government to set a limit, a lower limit on how many permanent residents they adopt every year. And so their limit is about 380,000 right now. And so that's the number that we have to work with. And so we're identifying 50,000 positions within that 380,000 that could be used to deal with this big backlog in the humanitarian and compassionate category. And so it's not that Hong Kongers are refugees or anything like that, but it's just that's a slot of positions that could be used instead of for refugees, used for H&C category.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think about the timeline when you got this idea floated?
Yeah.
So what is the rough timeline you're expecting, and what can Hong Kong immigrants here to do to support?
Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, I'm not in government. It's the Liberals who are in government, and it's the Liberals who have created this mess. And so what we're doing is we're proposing I think a very good solution to them. And so it's up to them to choose to do it or not do it. And up until now, they've chosen to not do this. They've chosen to leave it as it is, which I think is not good. So we're going to keep pushing, and I think it's important for Hong Kongers to keep pushing. And I have to say that over the years, I've talked to many Hong Kongers, and as a group, you have been very forthright and very aggressive in pushing your issues, and I think it's important because sometimes in Ottawa, you know, there's a million things coming at us as politicians, and the government has the same issue. And so when the pressure remains, you know, when you can keep the subject in front of people is important. And so I'd say that to Hong Kongers, to make sure that you keep pressuring politicians, keep the issue in front of people, because otherwise issues go away and they don't get as much attention as they should. So that's all we can do, is we can put pressure on the government. Hopefully they will see the common sense in this plan and actually move forward and do it.
So that would be something you could propose in the immigration committee then, right?
Yeah, and other ways. There's other ways that we can talk to the government about that. But it's also important that Hong Kongers put pressure on Liberal MPs, on the minister themselves, through social media. I mean, there's lots of different ways to do it, and that's important.
Right, but obviously every immigrant, no matter whether you're immigrant or not, we need a roof at the top. You need housing.
Yeah.
So this week you have been traveling around Vancouver, trying to talk about your private bill, the housing cost transparency bill.
Yes.
So could you elaborate more on that bill?
Yeah, for sure. And that's the main reason why I came to Vancouver this week, is to talk about my private member's bill, C-287, and it is about housing. And housing is such a critical issue in Canada right now. Both the quantity of housing that's available and the cost of housing is very high. Even though it's come down a little bit in the last little while, it's still way higher than it was just a few years ago. And one of the issues that I've discovered, I used to build houses. Before I came to Parliament, I was a home builder, so I know a little bit about this. And we have building codes that dictate how we construct buildings in Canada. And those codes are constantly changing. And it seems like, as a builder, my experience was those codes are always adding to a house. They're never taking away, they're always adding. And by adding, that always means cost. So when you add something new to a house, to a building, it adds cost. And it adds complexity as well. And it makes it take longer to build, the inputs are more, and as a result, what happens? The cost to the consumer goes up. And house prices are too high even now, and we have to find ways to actually bring it down, not increase it higher. And so what my bill does is it goes back to the building code changes, and it forces the government, when they propose a building code change, to make sure that it's fully costed, that we know who's going to pay for it, we know what they're trying to accomplish, what it's going to cost up front, but also if there's any savings or costs as years go by, we need to know that. Because sometimes there's a cost up front, but there's a benefit that comes back to you. Sometimes there's a cost up front and continuing costs that happen year after year. So we need to know all of that. Right now, that information is not readily available. Sometimes it's calculated in strange ways, like as a percentage of a cost, percentage of a building, or it might be set as a global number, like $1 billion for Canada. I mean, these numbers don't mean anything, because we need to know how much per dwelling, how much per house is it going to cost to make this change. And not only that one change, but there's always multiple changes. So we need to know that when you put change upon change upon change upon change, what's the total impact on the cost of a house from all of these changes that are being proposed. And maybe we shouldn't do them all. Maybe we should scale some of them back. Maybe some of them don't make as much sense. They're good ideas, but we can't afford them, So that's what the bill is doing. And the second thing that it does is right now it's also very difficult to know who is pushing this idea and who's involved in making this change. And so my bill will require the government to list out the names of the people that are actually pushing for this change. Because sometimes we get situations where people have vested interests in things. You know, if you're a company that makes heat pumps and you're able to change the code to require a heat pump, well, that's good for you, right? So we need to know if somebody has some interest like that. Essentially, it's a conflict of interest, right? And also just to know who to phone, who to talk to about this change, or who to lobby. And so if the government can do that and provide better cost information so that people all know upfront what this is going to cost, we can make better decisions about the cost of changes to the building codes and ultimately lower the price of housing in Canada.
Right. What's even more interesting is you just mentioned about you have vast experience in building, and you were the owner of a building company before being MP. So, and during that interactive session, you mentioned a keyword, customer service.
Yeah.
And that's very businessman attitude.
Yeah.
When you want to say that in a government, civil servants perspective. So, what is your observation, as an MP about customer service right now?
Yeah.
In the government?
Well, so if we back up and talk about why customer service, I mean, everybody knows if you have a business, no matter what you're doing, if you provide good customer service, that's the key to being successful in business, right? You can even be not the best product necessarily, but if you give superior customer service, people are going to come back to you because that's ultimately, you're solving a problem for them. And that exact same approach needs to be applied to government because it's no different. I'm a public servant. I represent people in Saskatoon in my case, and I need to be serving those people. When a Canadian calls the immigration department, IRCC, and they need help, they are a customer calling a service provider, and that service provider should be giving good customer service. It just makes sense. And you shouldn't hang up and be frustrated with the lousy service that you received from IRCC, or the fact that they don't give you the details, or that you can't find where your file is, or they just don't care about your file, or and all of these things are bad customer service. And I think all of government, whether it's immigration department, the tax department, anybody, we should be striving to provide good customer service. It doesn't mean you always give a good answer. Sometimes you have bad answers, but if it's a bad answer, tell me. Give me the information. Don't
at least response, communication is going on.
Because once, if you have the information and you're not successful in what you're trying to do, well, you can change then. You can go down plan B, right? But if you don't know, then you're stuck in limbo. And we have so many cases like that where particularly in immigration, where people are stuck in limbo. They're not moving forward. They don't know what to do. They don't know if they should try to go to a different country or if they should hire a lawyer, or what do we do? Because the information just isn't there. It's bad customer service. And so I'm a big proponent of good customer service, and I'd love to see that right across the board in government.
So what is the turning point or trigger that made you from a businessman to be an MP?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've always been interested in politics ever since I was a kid, but I was more interested in getting some real world experience, and I've worked as an accountant, I've worked in a manufacturing company in administration, and as you pointed out, I had a home building business for 11 years, and learned a lot about business through that. But it was in about 2017, in Saskatoon, the home building industry kind of slowed down a bit, and so I had a bit more time on my hands. And because I wasn't building projects, if there was no customers, I didn't want to lose money by building projects. And I found myself complaining a lot about our Prime Minister at the time, Justin Trudeau. And I was getting very frustrated with the decisions he was making, and I could see how this was not good for our country. I have a very good friend who's also a member of Parliament. Her name is Kelly Block.
Right.
And so we were chatting numerous occasions. And finally she just said to me, Brad, you need to stop complaining and do something about this.
Getting there.
You should get involved. And so I thought, I've kind of been interested in this for a while, and yes, maybe I should. So there was a riding in Saskatoon that happened to be held by the New Democrats, an NDP riding. And so I thought, well, I can maybe take a chance there. And so that's what I did. I went out and I knocked on doors and I started talking to people for about a year actually before the election. Mm-hmm. And I talked to many, many people. And result is I won the election, and I've won 2 more since then. So that's how I got involved, and it's been very interesting. I really enjoy the job, And we did get rid of Trudeau, but we still have the Liberals, and so I've got more work to do.
Right. And so obviously Saskatchewan is not the first place where many Canadians would travel to or move to for the first place, instead of Toronto or Vancouver. So what is it like for you, as a new MP, stepping from Saskatchewan into Ottawa? What was the feeling that when you got elected from the middle of Canada, literally, to Ottawa?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's differences being in a larger city, different climates, things like that. But fundamentally, the importance of Ottawa is that it represents all regions of Canada, and so there are representatives there, obviously, from right across the country. And so myself, as somebody who's coming from the prairies, from a prairie city like Saskatoon, I have my own perspective. Saskatoon is more rural. It's more laid back and relaxed. Very community-oriented. People know people. It's a fairly tight-knit community. Of course, we're a very resource-based province. There's lots of agriculture that goes on. Most people in Saskatoon aren't too far removed from a farmer, so people are close to that aspect of it. But we also have a tremendous amount of industry. We have, in terms of resource industry, we have oil and gas. We have uranium is a big industry in Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan produces a large percentage of the world's uranium, and particularly into the United States. We produce about 2/3 of the uranium used in the United States, right in Saskatchewan. Potash is another big thing that's used in agriculture all around the world. We ship potash all across the world. And we have gold, we have all kinds of resources, forestry. So there's a lot of, and then we have industry. We have, like I said, I worked at a manufacturing company. We built farm machinery. There's lots of that going on. So we have a very diversified economy, and it's very stable. We don't see the ups and downs, the booms and the busts in Saskatchewan, because if one industry is not doing well, there's another one that usually is. And so it kind of compensates, and it's a great place to be. And our weather can be different. We can be cold in the winter, but it's actually not as bad as people think. We have the most sunshine in all of Canada. And so it's a happy place. I say to people, yeah, it might be a little bit cold, but I'm always happy because the sun is shining.
So actually you're answering my last question to you. So there's so many Hong Kong or Chinese immigrants, Asian immigrants, they may not have visited Saskatchewan ever, including myself. So what would you say the three key words that you would say, hey, come on, visit us, or if I move, come on here. So what would you say then?
Well, I would say community. It's a great community to live in. It's slower paced life, so it's a relaxed place to live, and it's very friendly. We have a great university, particularly if you have any interest in agriculture. Our university is world class. But we also have a synchrotron, which is a device that's the only one in Canada. We do a lot of research, and there's a tremendous amount of research that happens in Saskatoon, and so it's a very, if you haven't seen Saskatoon, and you said you haven't been there,
no.
So you need to come to Saskatoon because it's a great city, especially, and if you're a little concerned about the weather, visit us in the summertime because it's beautiful in the summertime. Lots of sunshine, it's warm, it doesn't rain that much. Like Vancouver, it rains all the time, right? That's what I'm told.
Well, not really. So thank you very much, Brad. And could you face the camera, say a few words, like 30 seconds would be to our struggling, hardworking Hong Kong immigrants trying to find a pathway in Canada? Can you say a few words to them?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say that I'm sorry that you're going through the troubles that you're going through, because as I said, the Canadian government specifically asked you to come to Canada and gave you what you thought was a pathway in a reasonable time frame to become a citizen in our country, and the government has clearly failed on that. And so I'm truly sorry that you're in that position. And I know from talking with many of you the struggles that you have with your families and with the uncertainty with having to, especially when work permits expire and all of the complications that happen with that. We've talked a lot about that, and I understand that. And I want to see that improved. And that's why we're putting forward our idea to the government to find a way to fix the problem, to not have you languish in the H&C category for 50 years, which is a ridiculous number to even say, but actually get you processed through the system. And so I wish I could do it myself. I wish I was in government and could actually implement that, but we have to work with the Liberals, and so we'll do the best we can. But I think as all of us, myself and everyone out there, trying to put pressure on the Liberals to see that this is a common sense solution to put people through the H&C category, get this commitment filled as was promised to you in the first place. That's what I'm fighting for, and I hope you'll continue to fight for that too.
Thank you very much, Brad.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Great chatting with you.
Yeah, good to see
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.